My name is Kriss. That's Kriss spelled Kriss. A compromise my parents settled on when they knew they wanted to name me Kriss. However, they did not want me to be Christopher. No child of mine was going to be named after a saint, declared my father. However, Kriss, spelled Kris, was a common way to spell a girl's name. Still is. So they added an S. Yes, just like Kris Kringle. Yeah. And so I came into the world with a Unitarian Universalist name and an irreversible connection to Christmas. Rather ironic, wouldn't you say? Now, of course, my fascination, or love, as some might call, my fascination, love, or some might call obsession with Christmas was not genetic. I came by it organically, growing stronger as I grew older, fed constantly by an equal passion for the holiday expressed by my grandmothers, and later my wife's family. As a child, I was given my own Christmas tree for my bedroom. See? By my grandmother, of course. And I would decorate my room with whatever Christmas creations I could dream up or whatever I was given to me by my parents that were leftovers. There you can see the little castle I built. And as I grew older, my collection and passion for the holiday grew even faster. I took over decorating our home one year when my dad, who's somewhat of a Scrooge, was sick. I even managed to talk my mom into buying a real tree again to go along with a fake tree we still put up in the living room. And we had a very small living room. Mom still talks about that year to this day, and Dad still says we were nuts. By the time Deb and I were married, I had quite a collection of my own. And if I thought my grandmothers overdid Christmas, Deb's family took it to a whole new level. I could not believe my good fortune. So over the years, I continued to collect all things Christmas, and fortunately, our houses grew in size to accommodate, or some might say because of it. I have walked out of more than one house that I could possibly not envision being decorated for Christmas. That's true. My passion was well known and well fed by family and friends. I ended up with most of my grandmother's collections when they passed, and the same with Deb's grandmother. Throughout the year, I would hit garage sales, thrift shops, antique shops, searching for and adding more so that next Christmas, more shelves could feature my treasures and more rooms could be decorated. Our home during the holidays really became a wonderland, featuring the elegant, the beautiful, and yes, some gaudy highlights. My family always decorated the same. The elf goes here, Santa goes here. The arrangement always goes on the buffet. Not me. I would change things up every year and begin the planning process while I was scouring those garage sales and thrift shops. It would take up to 2 weeks to complete the decorating process. I'm talking about inside. Outside was another whole story. That work started in October. I hated putting lights up when it was cold. Before it got cold, and took until Thanksgiving pretty much to complete. There you see the last two houses. I don't miss decorating that. By the time we decided to upend our lives and move to Mexico, my decorations, which at this point included a massive Christmas kitsch collection of 50s and 60s collectibles, required the storage space of a one-car garage. Truly. But wait, stop. But I have been a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, certainly not a Christian. I'm pretty atheistic, in fact. Those who know me frequently ask, how can you celebrate Christmas? I've wrestled with this question many times over the years. Well, not too much, actually. I've settled on a fairly simple answer. Because I love it. It's one of my biggest creative outlets. I love the lights, the color, the warmth, and the tradition, and the memories each holiday season brings. My grandmother's return every year for the annual Christmas. Also, for the past 25 years, we've hosted a party for our friends, which has become a tradition where Deb and I have chosen to spend our gift-giving treasure each year. We rarely buy anything for each other now. We just enjoy sharing food, drink, in our home, decked out in all its wonderlandfulness. with people we care about most. As you will see, this is a very Unitarian Universalist way to celebrate Christmas and the holidays. So how did we get here? Here with the celebration of Christian holiday, where a Christian holiday dominates everything. In short, the season was culturally co-opted 2,000 years ago. Celebrating the birth of Jesus in December is no accident. In its infancy, Christianity was a blip on the radar of religions and cultures celebrating at this time of year. Oh, and it did not hurt that one of the world's greatest empires, the Romans, had adopted Christianity. Here's a description of the birth of Christmas from history.com.
In the early years of Christianity, Easter was the main holiday. The birth of Jesus was not celebrated. In the 4th century, church officials decided to institute the birth of Jesus as a holiday. Unfortunately, the Bible does not mention a date for his birth, a fact Puritans later pointed out in order to deny the legitimacy of the celebration. Although some evidence suggests that his birth may have occurred in the spring, because why would shepherds be herding in the middle of winter? Pope Julius I chose December 25th. It's commonly believed that the church chose this date in an effort to adopt and absorb the traditions of the pagan Saturnalia festival. First called the Feast of the Nativity, the custom spread to Egypt by 432 and to England by the end of the 6th century. By holding Christmas at the same time as traditional winter solstice festivals, church leaders increased the chances that Christmas would be popularly embraced, but gave up the ability to dictate how it was celebrated. By the Middle Ages, Christianity had, for the most part, replaced pagan religion. On Christmas, believers attended church, then celebrated raucously in a drunken carnival-like atmosphere, similar to today's Mardi Gras.
I believe it's safe to say that the celebration of Christmas, once adopted and adapted by Western empires from the Romans on, that there was no turning back. However, Western societies did not abandon their non-Christian traditions, but rather integrated Christ Mass celebrations with older customs and practices, which opened the door for more non-secular celebrations and festivities that those radical Universalists and Unitarians would introduce to America and change the course of how the holiday would be celebrated in the century to come.
That was my bookshelf that I miss very much. This reading is Christmas is Subversive by Kendall R. Gibbons. One of the great things about Christmas is that it is a sturdy holiday. Christmas doesn't wimp out when times are hard, comes anyway, even if there are hardly any presents, even when there isn't much food to make a feast with, even if you're sad, even if the world around you is at war, even if you're living in fear and danger and oppression, Christmas still comes. And when it comes, Christmas is subversive. Christmas, with its story of an unwed mother and a doubtful father, with its legend of a helpless baby born in a stable who was worshipped by some of the wisest, richest men in the world, with its tale of the child pursued by the deadly wrath of kings, who escaped as a refugee to a foreign land far from home. Christmas, with its ancient, enduring summons of peace on earth, goodwill to all people everywhere. You can't stop a day like that with a little hardship or greed or injustice. It will show up anyway, shining the light of a midnight star into the darkest places of our collective lives. Do not underestimate the power of the manger and the hope it holds. The Christmas song of the angels is not as innocent as it sounds. It has turned the world upside down before now. It still can.
I've always been amused by the right wing's call to arms and what they call the liberal war on Christmas. That my choosing to say happy holidays is a visceral threat to them is almost laughable. If it were really a battle, consider what all the ammunition we deploy in this war looks like to them. A menorah adjacent to a manger scene. The use of the word Xmas, secular holiday music in stores, and for some of the most devout, Santa Claus himself is even a threat. Remember how the beautiful children's story, Polar Express, was deemed demonic? And I won't even go into the little heretics of Whoville, where, when stealing Christmas, the Grinch found not one creche or angel to steal. If only who-whatsits and wamboozlers had been mentioned somewhere in the New Testament. Alas, if we're really in a war on Christmas, you have the evangelicals on one side defensively dug into the trenches, and the other side kind of happy holidaying with, meh, I have too much Christmas stuff to do to think about it. Pass me the damned eggnog. UUs, however, may be a little less meh and a little more, my, that's not right. The Unitarian Universalists I know aren't looking to take the Christ out of Christmas, as the right would insist. They're looking for ways to make the season more inclusive for all, not just Christians. Through readings, sermons, music, and how we live our lives, consciously celebrate the season for lifting up all of humanity in song, in spirit, and in charity. This is how we live, the first of our 7 principles, the inherent worth and dignity of all. Rather than accusing us of killing Christmas, evangelicals should be congratulating and thanking us for the very existence of the traditional American Christmas. For you see, at the founding of our nation, Unitarians and Universalist clergy and their congregants saved Christmas. Truly. Here is an historical description of how and why Christmas was banned, according to Reverend Terry Springberry.
When the Puritans came to this country, they banned Christmas. At that time in England, Christmas was nothing like the Christmas we celebrate today. It was a wild public party, much like Mardi Gras. People drank, they got crazy, they shot off guns and fireworks.
Sounds like here.
They made a nuisance of themselves. This partying way of celebrating had an old history. The Puritans understood the pagan roots of Christmas, noted that the Bible never mentioned celebrating Christ's birthday, and insisted that everyone should simply ignore it. In 1621, when some of the colony's newer residents tried to take Christmas Day off, the governor ordered them back to work. 30 years later, the General Court of Massachusetts declared the celebration of Christmas to be a criminal offense. The Puritans did win that Christmas war for a long time. For nearly 150 years, celebrating Christmas was illegal in New England. But by the 1800s, things had changed. In the southern parts of the new United States, people had been celebrating Christmas with public partying, and so had the new Irish immigrants who were settling in New England. Christmas was a great day for all the local bars. Additionally, by the early 1800s, Puritans no longer had the moral and political authority to hold off Christmas. They were no longer a unified group and had divided into conservative and liberal factions. And the liberal Puritans, who were on the verge of becoming Unitarians, began to call for the public observance of Christmas.
When I presented the One more. It's coming. There. When I presented the early history of both the Universalist and Unitarian theological movements, I highlighted how New England congregational pulpits were being taken over by clergy who dared to question Calvinist and Trinitarian theologies. They were demonized by both Puritan and Orthodox Congregationalists as heretics, non-believers, and in some cases they were even called Unitarians before the actual denomination was organized. There ensued years of vitriol and accusations, much more closely resembling a true ideological war rather than today's more performative war on Christmas. Which brings me to how Christmas was mixed up in this theological battle. Universalists totally embraced the idea of celebrating Christmas as their new denomination was growing. These early religious radicals loved Christmas and made it a big part of their year-end celebrations. According to Stephen Nissenbaum in his book, The Battle for Christmas, in the early 1900s, in the early 19th century, it was the Universalist denomination that proselytized for Christmas more than any other at the time. Unitarians likewise embraced Christmas, even though they were rejecting the theology of the Trinity, which begs the question, why were Unitarians celebrating Christmas? Historian Jack Larkin writes, obviously it did not reflect a theological stance about the importance of Christ's nativity, since they considered Jesus a man, greatest of the prophets and teachers, but not the divine Son of God. But there are both religious and social explanations. Keeping Christmas was a highly visible way for Unitarians to separate themselves from the Calvinism of their forebears and their contemporaries. It suggested a more broadly tolerant, less rigid approach to life as well as religion. To put it another way, the Unitarians and the Universalists were challenging the status quo in order to bring a new, more humanistic approach to celebrating the season. And as a result of their resistance to the orthodox and the evangelical dogma of their day, we have Christmas most of us recognize, the one we are accused of trying to kill. Here's literally how Unitarians and Universalists changed the course of how we celebrate in the United States, as described by Robin Pugh.
In the 1800s, the Unitarians were trendsetters. They were well-educated, often wealthy, and had access to and control of popular publications. Christmas, the Unitarians believed, could be a holiday to promote their values of generosity and charity and social good. The following Unitarians were among those who created modern Christmas traditions centering on children, gift exchange, and charitable giving. Clement Clark Moore, a sometimes Unitarian, published his poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, more commonly known as The Night Before Christmas, in 1823. Prior to Moore's poem, St. Nick was always portrayed as a medieval bishop known for acts of charity. Moore invented the Santa Claus we all know and love. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf. Moore's Santa Claus believed in the worth and dignity of every child, and that all deserve some kindness and pleasure. Later, it was another Unitarian, Thomas Nast, a cartoonist, who placed Santa on the North Pole as a message that he existed for all the children of the world. Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol in 1843, capturing many of Dickens' thoughts about society, human nature, and forgiveness. A Christmas Carol depicts a Christmas that is more than just a holiday. It's a way of being. For a few days at least, people treat one another as they were meant to be treated all the time. Goodwill is offered freely, not just to the people we know or who we think deserve it, but to everyone. A Christmas Carol brought charity to the forefront of Christmas, as well as the idea that Christmas was a time to gather family and friends around overflowing dinner tables and Christmas trees filled with lights, decorations, and toys. Charles Follen, a German immigrant, a Unitarian, and the first German professor at Harvard, brought the Christmas tree to Boston. He invited several friends to his home for a Christmas party where he'd put up a tree lit with candles and covered with ornaments, as he remembered from his childhood in Germany. Two of his guests, both Unitarian women, were influential popular magazine writers who gushed about the tree's loveliness. The tradition of setting up a Christmas tree soon spread to many American homes.
Just as an aside, looking at that last image, one of the greatest Christmas memories I have was when we were invited to Norwegian friend's house, where they actually lit a full Christmas tree with candles. You haven't seen something like that. It's spectacular and quite frightening. Nobody left the room by itself. So add to the list she just read the hymns and songs written by Unitarians, including Jingle Bells. I heard the bells on Christmas Day. It came upon a midnight clear. The latter I've already shared the history of, and the former, Jingle Bells, I'll talk about in a little bit. So by the end of the 19th century, Unitarians and Universalists had not only replaced the Orthodox Calvinist and Puritans in the pulpits across New England and Western states, reversing their anti-Christmas bans, but played a major part in establishing the traditions that we recognize today, as you heard. Christmas was in effect moved from the pews to the parlor, with an emphasis on children, family, peace, and charity. So I say, as a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, what is there not to celebrate about the kind of Christmas that those UUs who came before us introduced?